Everyone thought my grandpa was losing his mind. But he was hiding a secret. And he trusted me to uncover it. They always called me quiet. Like it was a flaw. Like being quiet meant I didn't notice anything. But the truth is, I noticed everything. I'm Emily Hayes, and this is my story. Not the one my family wants you to hear. The one I lived. The one I survived. My grandfather, Walter Hayes, was 82. He was gentle, kind, and he loved his family more than anything. He lived alone in a small house in the suburbs. He still drove sometimes, still took pride in his independence, and he always insisted on doing things his way. But people started saying he was forgetful. My Uncle Mark, my mother's brother, started taking over Grandpa's finances. "Don't worry," Mark said. "I'll handle everything." My Aunt Nadia nodded like she believed him. Even my mom shrugged and said, "He's getting old. We should help." And I believed them too, at first. Then the first odd thing happened. It was a small detail, something most people wouldn't even remember. Grandpa called me one evening and asked if I'd checked the mailbox. I said, "No, Grandpa." "Why?" He hesitated. Then said, "Because there should have been a check in there." A check. From his tenant. His rent. The rent he'd been collecting for years. It was always on time. But that month, it wasn't. He sounded confused. I could hear it in his voice. "Maybe the tenant forgot," I said. "Maybe," he replied. But I heard something else. Not confusion. Fear. Like he was afraid to say it out loud. After that, I started noticing small things. Mark was always around Grandpa. He was always helping. Mark took Grandpa's bank cards. Mark made excuses when I asked questions. Mark insisted he was just protecting Grandpa. And everyone believed him because Mark was smooth. Mark was confident. Mark was the kind of person people trusted. But I wasn't convinced. Not anymore. One night, I went to Grandpa's house. Just to check on him. He opened the door with a weak smile. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Hey, Grandpa," I replied. I noticed his hands shaking. I noticed the stack of mail on the counter. I noticed his eyes were tired. But then, he did something that changed everything. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small notebook. He looked at me like he was deciding whether he should trust me. Then he handed it to me. "This is for you," he said. I stared at it. "What is it?" He swallowed. "It's my record," he said softly. "My proof." My heart started racing. I didn't understand what he meant. He continued. "People think I'm forgetting. They think I'm losing it. But I'm not." I didn't know what to say. He looked me in the eyes and whispered, "Mark is taking my money." I felt my stomach drop. I asked him, "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Yes. And I don't want to accuse him. Not yet. Not until I'm sure." Then he said the words that broke me. "I'm too old to fight. But I'm not too old to plan." He told me he had been writing everything down for months. Every withdrawal. Every transfer. Every date. Every amount. Every lie. And he said the most important part. "If anything happens to me, you need to know the truth." He handed me the notebook again. This is your responsibility now, he said. My throat tightened. Grandpa. He cut me off. No. Listen. You're the only one who ever truly listened to me. And you're the only one I trust. He smiled sadly. People will think I'm confused. But I'm not. I just couldn't make them listen. That night, I left Grandpa's house with the notebook in my bag and my heart pounding. I didn't know what I was walking into. But I knew one thing for certain. My family was not as perfect as they looked. And my grandfather had been hiding a truth he didn't want to say out loud. Because he knew the moment he spoke, he would be dismissed. He knew the moment he accused, he would be labeled crazy. So he chose a different path. He chose silence. He chose patience. He chose evidence. And he chose me. After that night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared. Because I was furious. The kind of anger that doesn't scream. The kind that sits quietly in your chest and turns into strategy. I kept replaying Grandpa's words. People will think I'm confused. But I'm not. Mark was taking money from him. And everyone was pretending it wasn't happening. I went home and sat at my desk. I opened the notebook. My hands were shaking. Every page was filled with neat handwriting. Dates. Amounts. Notes. Small details that only someone who was paying attention would notice. At first, I thought it was just withdrawals. But then I saw the pattern. The same days. The same amounts. The same kind of emergency excuses. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. I closed the notebook and sat in silence. Because I realized something else. If I went to my mother, she would defend Mark. If I went to my aunt, she would call it family. If I went to the police without proof, they would say Grandpa was confused. That's what they would say. That's what everyone would say. So I did the only thing I could. I waited. I watched. I started collecting evidence quietly. I became careful. I didn't ask Grandpa questions anymore. I didn't make him feel cornered. I just visited him more often. I sat with him while he drank tea. I listened to his stories. I acted like nothing was wrong. But I was building a case. Every time Mark came around, I watched his behavior. I watched his phone calls. I watched his tone. I watched his face when he thought no one was looking. Mark always smiled like he was in control. He always acted like he was doing Grandpa a favor. But I saw the way he looked at the money. Like it wasn't Grandpa's. Like it was his. One afternoon, I walked into Grandpa's kitchen and found him staring at his laptop. He looked tired. But his eyes were clear. "Emily," he said. "What?" He pointed to the screen. It was a bank account summary. The kind of thing you only see when you know how to navigate the online banking system. He said, "I've been doing this for months." I sat down. "What is it?" He looked at me. "I asked the bank to send me monthly statements," he said. He sighed. "They keep coming to Mark's house." I stared at him. "You asked the bank to send statements to Mark?" He nodded. I couldn't risk him seeing I was watching. So I did it quietly. My mind raced. He had been watching the money. He had been watching Mark. And he had been doing it without making a scene. Because that's how he always handled things. Not with anger. With precision. With patience. That's when Grandpa said something that hit me harder than any accusation. "I'm going to die soon, Emily." The words were quiet. But they were final. I felt my throat tighten. "Grandpa." He interrupted me. "No. Listen." He reached into his drawer and pulled out another envelope. "This is not for Mark," he said. "This is for you." My hands trembled. He continued. "I've arranged everything with my lawyer. When I'm gone, you will receive the file." He looked at me like he was asking for something. Not money. Not forgiveness. Just trust. "I need you to be strong," he said. I nodded. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because I knew what he was asking me to do. He was asking me to fight his battle after he was gone. And that was the moment I understood the truth. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about dignity. It was about a man who had spent his whole life being proud, being strong, and being the one who protected everyone else. Now he was the one who needed protection. And the only person he trusted was me. So I made a promise in my heart. I promised Grandpa. I will finish this. And I knew, deep down, that this promise would change my life. The next few weeks felt like I was living inside a secret. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. I didn't say a word. But I watched. I recorded. I prepared. Grandpa's health got worse. It wasn't sudden. It was slow. Like a candle burning down. He started forgetting things again, but this time I knew it wasn't confusion. It was fatigue. It was the body giving up. He still smiled when I walked in. He still insisted on making tea. He still tried to act strong. But I could see the truth. He was getting weaker. And I was terrified. One afternoon, Mark showed up unannounced. He walked in like he owned the place. He hugged Grandpa. Then he turned to me. "Hey, Emily," he said. He sounded friendly. But there was a tone in his voice that I hated. Like he was reminding me that he was the one in control. "Hey," I replied. Mark sat down at the table and began talking about the future. "You know," he said, "Grandpa needs someone to look after his affairs. We've been thinking, maybe it's time to sell the house." I froze. Sell the house? The house was Grandpa's. It was his home. It was the place he built with his own hands. It was where he lived alone for years, proud and stubborn. Mark continued, "The market is good right now. We could get a lot. And I could handle everything." Grandpa looked at me. I could see the fear in his eyes. Not because he didn't want to sell. Because he knew what handling everything meant. I didn't say anything. Mark smiled. "You don't have to worry," he said. "I'm doing this for his best interest." And that's when I realized something. Mark wasn't just stealing money. He was trying to steal Grandpa's entire life. And he was doing it slowly. Because if he rushed, someone might notice. If he rushed, the truth might come out. So he moved carefully. Like a thief who thinks the house is empty. After Mark left, Grandpa looked at me. His eyes were wet. He whispered, "He wants everything." I sat beside him. "Grandpa," I said softly, "I'm going to stop him." He shook his head. "You can't fight him," he said. He's strong. He's smart. He has everyone fooled. I held his hand. Grandpa, I said, I'm not going to fight him with anger. I'm going to fight him with proof. He squeezed my hand. Good, he said. That's how I wanted it. Then he did something I didn't expect. He gave me another notebook. This one was different. This one was filled with receipts. Old ones. Bank statements. Letters. Everything. He said, "This is the real proof." I stared at him. Why didn't you show this before? He smiled sadly. Because I didn't want to give him a reason to stop, he said. If he knew I was watching, he would have changed his pattern. I understood then. Grandpa had been playing a game with Mark. A game where Mark thought he was winning. But Grandpa was always one step ahead. He had been waiting for the right moment. And now, the moment was here. The moment when Grandpa couldn't protect himself anymore. The moment when I had to step in. That night, I sat in my room and opened the second notebook again. I read through the pages. Every entry was a story. Every receipt was proof. Every transfer was a confession. It was all there. And I realized the truth that hit me harder than anything else. Grandpa wasn't just being robbed. He was being erased. And the worst part? No one would believe him. No one would believe me. So I made a decision. I would not tell anyone until I had enough evidence. Until I had the final puzzle piece. Until I could show the truth so clearly that no one could deny it. Because I had learned something from Grandpa. Patience is not weakness. Patience is power. And I was going to use it. The day I realized this was bigger than money was the day I learned about the will. Grandpa called me to his house. His voice was quiet. Not weak. Quiet like a secret. Emily, he said, I need you to come here. I have something to show you. When I arrived, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. He looked at me and said, "This is my will." I felt a strange chill. Because I knew wills were legal documents. And legal documents were hard to fight. If Mark had control of Grandpa's money, he would also control the will. But Grandpa looked calm. Almost confident. He opened the folder and handed me an envelope. Inside this, he said, is a letter for you. My hands trembled. What about the rest of the will? I asked. Grandpa smiled softly. It's not what you think, he said. He continued, Mark will think he has everything. He will think I left nothing for anyone. My heart sank. That means, you didn't leave him anything? Grandpa nodded. I left him nothing. Because he didn't earn it. My mind raced. This was bigger than money. This was humiliation. This was exposure. Grandpa said, but I didn't want to make it obvious. I didn't want him to suspect. He paused. Emily, he said, you are going to get a file from my lawyer after I'm gone. It has everything. The proof. The statements. The recordings. I felt my stomach drop. Recordings? I whispered. Grandpa nodded. Yes, he said. I recorded some conversations. He doesn't know. I stared at him. How did you do that? He smiled. I learned from you, he said. You always record everything in your mind. I just used a device. I didn't know what to say. My throat was tight. He looked at me. Listen, he said. You must promise me something. What? You must not tell anyone until the time is right, he said. If you tell my family now, they will call me paranoid. They will call you dramatic. They will protect him. I nodded. I promise. He leaned back. Good, he said. Then he handed me the envelope again. Read this, he said. I opened it. Inside was a letter written in his handwriting. He had written it for me, but he had also written it for the future. The letter said, Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I want you to know that I loved you more than anyone. I'm sorry I couldn't protect myself. But I'm leaving you the truth. Do not let them steal my dignity. Do not let them rewrite my life. You are smart. You are patient. You will do what I could not. Love, Grandpa. I felt tears rise, but I didn't let them fall. Because I knew the tears would make me weak. And Grandpa didn't want me weak. He wanted me prepared. He wanted me ready. The next day, Grandpa passed away. It wasn't sudden. It was quiet. Like the end of a long story. We had a funeral. People said things. People cried. Mark spoke at the funeral. He said, Dad was a great man. I'm proud of him. Everyone nodded. Everyone believed him. Everyone except me. Because I knew the truth. And I knew something else. Mark thought he had won. He thought he had taken everything. But he didn't know the most important thing. He didn't know Grandpa had already set the trap. He didn't know that the truth was coming. He didn't know that I had the notebook. And he didn't know that the lawyer would be calling me soon. Because Grandpa had planned everything. Not with anger. With patience. With proof. And now, the real story was about to begin. The day the lawyer called me was the day I realized my grandfather had planned this like a chess game. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the notebook, when my phone rang. Emily Hayes, the voice asked. Yes. This is Attorney Martin. I was Walter Hayes' lawyer. My heart started pounding. I'm calling because Mr. Hayes left specific instructions. He requested that you receive the file after his passing. I didn't speak for a moment. Okay, I said quietly. The lawyer told me to come to his office the next day. I hung up and sat still. The file. The proof. The trap. Everything was coming to the surface. The next day, I walked into the lawyer's office. It was quiet. Clean. Professional. The kind of place where secrets become real. Attorney Martin handed me a thick envelope. This is the file, he said. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I took it and felt the weight of it in my hands. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like responsibility. I left the office and went straight to my car. I opened the file. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and printed transactions. Everything was organized. Everything was clear. And everything pointed to Mark. But the most powerful thing in the file was a list. A timeline. A timeline of money transfers, withdrawals, and lies. It showed how Mark had slowly been taking money from Grandpa for years. It showed how he had been using Grandpa's account like it was his own. It showed how he had been stealing not just money, but dignity. I sat in my car and stared at the timeline until my eyes burned. I realized then that this was not just financial theft. This was emotional abuse. Mark was not only stealing money. He was stealing Grandpa's independence. He was stealing his voice. He was stealing his legacy. And now, I was holding the proof. The next step was the bank. The bank was the one place where truth could be recorded. The bank was where evidence could become official. So I called the bank. I asked to speak to the fraud department. I didn't tell them everything. Not yet. I just said, I need to report suspicious activity on my grandfather's account. They asked for details. I gave them the timeline. I gave them the dates. I gave them the proof. I felt a strange relief. It wasn't relief from the truth. It was relief from the silence. Because I had been carrying this alone for months. And now, the truth was finally leaving my hands and entering the world. The bank promised to investigate. But they didn't promise anything else. I knew it would take time. Mark would be warned. Mark would try to cover his tracks. And if I wasn't careful, he could destroy the evidence. So I became even more careful. I started checking my emails more often. I started watching Mark's behavior more closely. And I started noticing something else. Mark was starting to get nervous. He was acting different. He wasn't as confident as before. He wasn't as smooth. One day, he came to my house and said, "Emily, I heard you went to the bank." His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. He tried to smile. But the smile looked forced. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He leaned closer. "Don't do anything stupid," he said. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He said, "You know, this family is messy. Don't drag us into something you can't handle." I felt my blood boil. But I didn't show it. Because I had learned from Grandpa. Anger is a reaction. Patience is a strategy. So I smiled politely. "I'm not dragging anyone anywhere," I said. "I'm just making sure Grandpa's name stays clean." Mark's eyes flashed. Then he left. And I knew, in that moment, that he had finally realized something. He realized that the truth was coming. And he was scared. Because he knew he couldn't fight it. Not with lies. Not with charm. Not with family loyalty. The truth was stronger than all of that. And the truth was finally waking up. After the bank investigation began, I started hearing small things. Not direct warnings. Not threats. Just the quiet kind of fear that shows up in a person when they know they're losing. Mark stopped calling me as often. He stopped asking how I was doing. He stopped showing up at Grandpa's house. It was like he knew something was coming. The truth has a way of making people disappear. One afternoon, the bank called me. "Emily," the voice said. "We need to speak with you in person. There are some inconsistencies. We need more documentation." I went to the bank. I sat in a private office with a fraud investigator. She was calm. Professional. Not emotional. Which was exactly what I needed. She asked me questions. Detailed questions. She asked about the withdrawals. She asked about the timeline. She asked if I knew who had access to the account. I answered everything. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "Emily," she said, "we're going to need you to speak to the police." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't wanted to involve the police. But I knew this was bigger than my fear. This was bigger than my family. This was about justice. So I agreed. The next day, I went to the police station. I sat in a small room with a detective named Harris. He asked me to tell the story. I did. I told him about Grandpa. I told him about the notebook. I told him about the timeline. I told him about Mark. And I told him about how the family had been pretending Grandpa was forgetful. Detective Harris listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just wrote everything down. When I finished, he looked at me and said, "You did the right thing." I didn't feel comforted. I felt exposed. Because the moment I involved the police, the story stopped being mine. It became public. It became real. Detective Harris asked for the file. I handed it over. He looked through the pages. He paused. He said, "This is strong evidence." I didn't say anything. Because I knew what that meant. It meant the police would start digging. It meant Mark would be questioned. It meant the truth would come out. The next few days were a blur. The police visited Grandpa's house. They asked questions. They searched for documents. They pulled up bank records. They interviewed the tenant. They looked at the property income. Everything was being checked. Mark started to show up again. But his behavior had changed. He wasn't confident anymore. He was nervous. One day, he came to my door. His hands were shaking. He said, "Emily, I want to talk." I let him in. He sat down. He looked at me like a man who was losing control. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said. I stared at him. "I'm doing what Grandpa wanted," I replied. Mark's eyes flashed. "Grandpa was confused," he said. "No," I said. "He wasn't. He was documenting you." Mark laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of laugh someone makes when they're trying to convince themselves they're not scared. "You don't have anything," he said. I leaned forward. "I have everything," I said. Mark's face went pale. Then he said the most dangerous thing a criminal can say. "Emily, if you go to court, I'll make sure you regret it." His voice was low. His eyes were cold. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because I had learned something from Grandpa. He didn't fight with anger. He fought with proof. And proof doesn't scare. Proof destroys. I looked at Mark and said calmly, "I'm not doing this for revenge." He blinked. "I'm doing this for Grandpa." Mark stood up. He looked at me one last time. Then he left. And I knew the moment he left. The truth had won. The only thing left was the court. The day the case went to court, I woke up early. Not because I was excited. Because I was nervous. But this time, my nervousness wasn't fear. It was responsibility. I put on a simple outfit. Nothing dramatic. No jewelry. No statements. I didn't want to look like someone trying to perform a story. I wanted to look like someone who was telling the truth. At the courthouse, the air felt heavy. The kind of heavy that makes you realize how serious a moment is. Mark was there. He looked different. His face was tired. His confidence was gone. He wasn't the same man who had walked into Grandpa's house with a smile. He looked like a man who knew he was being exposed. The judge entered. The courtroom went quiet. The case began. The prosecutor presented the evidence. The bank statements. The timeline. The receipts. The notebook. Everything. Mark's lawyer tried to argue that Grandpa was confused. That the withdrawals were misunderstandings. That Mark was just helping. But the evidence was too strong. The timeline showed consistent theft. The bank confirmed irregular transfers. The police confirmed the pattern. And then the moment came. The moment I had been waiting for. The prosecutor asked me to stand. I stood. My voice was steady. I told the truth. I told the story exactly as it happened. I didn't add drama. I didn't exaggerate. I simply spoke. I said, my grandfather trusted my uncle. He trusted him with his life. He trusted him with his money. He trusted him with his dignity. I paused. Then I said, he was not confused. He was being robbed. I saw Mark's face. He was staring at me. He looked like he wanted to scream. But he couldn't. Because the truth was holding him in place. The prosecutor finished. The judge looked at Mark. Then he said the words that finally made everything real. Mark Hayes, you are found guilty of elder financial exploitation. Mark's face went blank. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He just stood there. Like he had finally realized the cost of his actions. The judge continued. You will pay restitution. You will be sentenced according to the law. You will never be allowed to access the victim's accounts again. Mark's lawyer tried to speak. The judge cut him off. This is not a family issue, he said. This is a crime. When the court session ended, I walked out of the courtroom. I felt lighter. But I also felt something else. Sadness. Because the truth had come at a cost. Grandpa was gone. And the family was broken. But the truth had also done something else. It had given me peace. It had given Grandpa dignity. It had proven that he was not weak. He was smart. He was patient. He was strategic. He was brave. I went back to Grandpa's house that evening. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened his notebook. I read the last page. His handwriting was clear. His words were calm. He had written. I didn't want to fight with anger. I fought with evidence. Truth doesn't need loud voices. It just needs time. I closed the notebook. I took a deep breath. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Calm. The story was over. But the lesson remained. Patience wins. Evidence matters. And justice, even if it comes late, still comes. I looked out the window and whispered. Thank you, Grandpa. And for the first time since this began, I truly believed he was finally at peace.